The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as the emergency transmission crackled through the speakers. Ambassador Threxus, a towering Valkyrian with 4 arms and crystalline scales, leaned forward in alarm. 3 more handlers hospitalized. Station 7 is requesting immediate evacuation protocols. The voice belonged to Commander Zeth, and even through the static, his fear was palpable. The Cubs are uncontrollable. Across the galaxy, humanity remained the youngest species to join the Galactic Federation, having achieved faster-than-light travel a mere 30 cycles ago. Most species viewed them with cautious curiosity. These strange bipeds who seemed simultaneously fragile and disturbingly resilient. But today, the Council faced a crisis that had nothing to do with humanity's peculiar nature. The Vrexian Cubs had arrived. Vrexians were apex predators from a death world in the outer spiral. Adults stood 3 meters tall, possessed retractable claws capable of shearing through starship hull plating, and had evolved in an environment where everything from the vegetation to the atmosphere tried to kill them. Their cubs, rescued from a dying colony ship, were only slightly less terrifying, each one massing as much as a fully grown Valkyrian, with instincts honed by millennia of survival on the galaxy's most hostile world. The problem was simple. No species in the Federation could handle them. 13 different handlers from 7 different species had tried. All had failed. Most were still in medical facilities. Perhaps, Threxus suggested carefully, we should consider the unfortunate necessity of no. The voice came from the human delegation section. A single human stepped forward, her credentials identifying her as Astra Vale, xenobiological specialist. She was unremarkable by human standards. Average height, dark hair pulled into a practical ponytail, wearing the standard-issue jumpsuit of the Federation's Wildlife Conservation Corps. You're not euthanizing children because you're afraid of them. With respect, Specialist Vale, Threxus began, his translator rendering his tone as diplomatically as possible. These are not children. They are predators. Lethal ones. They're cubs, Astra corrected, her voice steady. Orphan cubs who've been traumatized, mishandled, and treated like monsters. Let me work with them. The council chamber erupted in debate. The idea was absurd. Humans were soft-bodied, lacking natural armor, claws, or even basic defensive capabilities. They came from a world the Federation classified as merely moderately hazardous, nothing compared to Vrexia. What could a human possibly do that 13 trained xenobiologists couldn't? But the alternative was execution, and the Federation had strict policies about sentient species. After 2 hours of heated discussion, Astra Vale was granted permission. She had 1 solar cycle to prove the cubs could be rehabilitated. She gave herself 3 hours. Station 7's containment facility resembled a fortress more than a nursery. Astra walked through the reinforced corridors alone, ignoring the concerned glances of the skeletal staff who'd remained behind. Through the observation window, she could see them, 5 Vrexian cubs, each the size of an adult human, covered in mottled gray fur and possessing 6 limbs ending in wickedly sharp claws. They prowled the enclosure, hissing and snapping at each other, their bioluminescent markings flashing aggressive patterns. The largest one, designation Cub Alpha in the facility records, stood in the center, his markings burning a deep crimson. Korik. Astra had read his file. 3 years old in Vrexian terms, equivalent to a human 5-year-old. The others orbited him. Nexa, Torval, Kryn, and Little Sylph, the runt who still bore scars from the colony ship disaster. Astra cycled through the airlock. The warning klaxons blared automatically. She disabled them. The moment she entered, all 5 cubs went still. 5 pairs of luminous eyes locked onto her. Korik's fur bristled, his claws extending with an audible snick. A low growl rumbled through the enclosure. Astra sat down cross-legged on the floor. She didn't make eye contact. Predator species often interpreted direct stares as challenges. Instead, she pulled out a small device from her pocket and began to hum. The cubs tensed, confused by this bizarre behavior. Here was prey, soft, vulnerable, perfect, and it was singing. Korik took a step forward. Then another. His siblings fanned out behind him, surrounding the human in a classic pack formation. Astra kept humming, a lullaby her mother had sung to her, while her fingers worked the device. Holographic images bloomed in the air. Vrexian landscapes, forests of bone-white trees, the twin moons of their homeworld. Sylph made a sound. Not quite a growl, more of a confused chirp. She crept closer, her small body trembling. Astra slowly extended her hand, palm down, still not looking directly at the cub. "I know you're scared," she said softly. "Your world is gone. Everyone smells wrong. Sounds wrong. Feels wrong." She cycled through more images. "But you're safe now. I promise." Korik snarled, a sound that would have sent any other species running. Astra didn't flinch. Instead, she changed the hologram to show Vrexian adult-cub interactions, the social grooming behaviors she'd spent the last week studying from archival footage. The cubs had never seen these behaviors. Raised on a colony ship, orphan young, they'd been deprived of their own culture. Now they watched, transfixed, as the holograms showed them what they were supposed to be. Slowly, deliberately, Astra mimicked one of the grooming gestures, a specific pattern of finger movements across her own arm. It was clumsy, unrefined, nothing like what a Vrexian adult could do. But it was recognizable. Korik's crimson markings flickered. His claws retracted slightly. He moved closer, close enough that Astra could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the sulfurous scent of his breath. For a long moment, they stayed like that, predator and prey, cub and human, both perfectly still. Then Korik lowered his massive head and bumped it gently against Astra's shoulder. The other cubs rushed forward. Suddenly Astra was surrounded by warm fur, clicking chirps, and carefully controlled claws. Sylph climbed into her lap, all 100+ kilograms of her, and began to purr, a sound like distant thunder. Nexa pressed against her back, while Torval and Kryn flopped down on either side. Korik settled directly in front of her, his body forming a protective barrier between his siblings and the outside world. His markings had shifted from aggressive crimson to a soft, contented blue. Astra began to groom them, her small human fingers working through their fur, removing debris, checking for injuries. She talked to them constantly in that soft, steady voice, explaining what she was doing, telling them about Earth, about pack behavior, about families. "Families protect each other," she murmured, working a tangle from Sylph's scruff. "Families teach each other. And sometimes, families look nothing alike." When the observation team finally worked up the courage to check the cameras 3 hours later, they found Astra Vale asleep in the center of the enclosure, 5 apex predator cubs curled protectively around her. Korik's eyes were open, watching the door with alert wariness, but his markings remained that peaceful blue. Commander Zeth's report to the Galactic Council was brief. "Crisis resolved. Recommend Specialist Vale for permanent assignment. Also recommend we study human child-rearing practices. Apparently, they're more formidable than we realized." The Council agreed. Over the following months, Astra became more than a handler. She became a mother. She taught the cubs to channel their hunting instincts into games, their aggression into protective loyalty, their fear into curiosity. She sang to them, played with them, disciplined them when necessary with the firm gentleness that only a human parent seemed to possess. Other species watched in amazement as the uncontrollable Vrexian cubs transformed into well-adjusted youngsters. Korik became a leader in truth, guiding his siblings with Astra's patient wisdom. When delegates visited, the cubs demonstrated perfect behavior, though they stayed close to their human, watching anyone who approached her with protective intensity. "How do you do it?" Ambassador Threxus asked during one visit, watching as Sylph, now twice Astra's size, gently placed a found toy at her feet like an offering. "They're predators. Apex predators. You should be terrified." Astra smiled, scratching behind Korik's ears as he leaned against her. The cub leader's markings glowed warm gold, the color of contentment, trust, and love. "They're not predators," she said simply. "They're children. And every child, no matter what species, needs the same things: safety, structure, affection, and someone who sees them not as monsters, but as individuals worth loving." Korik rumbled his agreement, his massive head resting in her lap. Around them, the other cubs played, apex predators who'd terrorized the galaxy, now content in the care of a human who'd understood what everyone else had missed. Sometimes, the most powerful weapon wasn't claws or teeth or armor. Sometimes, it was simply knowing how to love.